From Cardinal Television Studio, I'm Adelisa Badzik with your Fisher News Brief. Protesters gathered outside a Catholic girls' school in Philadelphia after a racist video surfaced. It was made by students at the school, and some say the administrator's response isn't good enough. Ryan Hughes has details.
And they do not do anything for moving kids today!
Parents and community activists protesting outside St. Hubert Catholic High School for Girls Wednesday with signs saying no more racism and hate hurts as outrage in the community grows.
I felt outraged and I felt like I was hurt for the first time.
I just thought when I saw the video that it was complete ignorance.
The Archdiocese of Philadelphia says this video was made by 3 students outside of school and posted to social media. We're blurring the video because it involves juveniles, but it appears to show a student spray painting another student's face black. You can hear girls laughing and saying, "You're a black girl, know your roots, and you're nothing more than a slave."
What do we want? Justice! And when do we want it? Now!
Adam McNeil, who organized the protest, says an apology from the Archdiocese is not enough.
We want them charged. This is a hate crime. This is ethnic intimidation.
In a new statement released Wednesday afternoon, the Archdiocese says, "We recognize and understand that the actions of these students have reopened societal wounds in a deeply painful way. Those allegedly responsible are not present in school and are being disciplined appropriately." Now, the Philadelphia branch of the NAACP says it's drafting a letter urging the school to increase education on Black history as the community tries to heal.
These young girls saying that this was done as a joke or in jest or whatever, well, it's not funny when it comes to the Black community.
Death follows Syrians everywhere. The chilling words of a Quake survivor in Northwestern Syria, where finding aid is still a big issue. Jomana Kardesh brings us an inside look at the mounting humanitarian crisis in a country already ravaged by years of war.
Baby Muhammad takes every little labored breath on his own. No mom, no dad to hold his tiny hand. His parents didn't survive the earthquake. The 3-month-old was rescued by neighbors who brought him to this ICU. In the room next door, we find Ghalia. The 26-year-old will never walk again. The earthquake brought down her family's home and crushed her back. Her stepmom tells us Ghalia and her 3 children were under the rubble for 18 hours. The children survived, but they don't know where they are. In every room of the Syrian hospital, a bittersweet tale of survival. Many more should have been alive today to tell their stories. Doctors say they tried to save them, but didn't have enough supplies to save everyone. The few medical facilities in rebel-held Syria are barely still standing after years of Russian and Syrian regime bombardment that left them ill-equipped to deal with a disaster of this magnitude.
We lost a lot of patients because of shortages in medical supplies. If we had them, we could have saved many more lives.
This was the scene here last Monday and in other facilities run by the Syrian American Medical Society.
This is the biggest disaster we ever had. We dealt with war injuries, but never had to deal with this many casualties at once.
The people of this devastated land cried for help, but no help came. Aid to rebel-held northwest Syria is tied in politics and at the mercy of a regime so cruel, even at a time like this. They dig and dig with their bare hands and whatever they can find, desperately trying to reach their loved ones. It's too late for rescues now. They just want to bury their dead. Mohammed is searching for relatives. Expressionless and numb, he tells us 21 of them, including children. Life here feels like one endless cycle of loss and grief. Most have been displaced time and time again by more than a decade of war. They're now homeless once again. We were sleeping under the trees, but it was so cold we came here, Sultan tells us. She begs the international community to send them shelters. We just want a tent, she says. I wish we had died with everyone else so we don't go through this, she tells us. We survived only to live this misery and agony. They have nowhere left to run. Millions are trapped in Idlib. It's the last rebel-held territory in Syria.
Mohammed says that she and her family fled Aleppo province and came here. She says they escaped the fighter jets and the airstrikes. And she says we came here and the earthquake followed us. She says death follows Syrians everywhere.
700 people lived in this now flattened residential complex. Only a handful survived. Young men from nearby villages came running to help get people out, she tells us. But what can they do? They tried digging. We heard people screaming, "Get us out, get us out." Then they went quiet. They all died. 2 days later, they pulled a little boy and girl. Their dead bodies were still warm. Others made it. After hours of this painstaking rescue, little Ahmed was pulled out alive. The White Helmets, heroes of Syria's war, did all they can to save as many as they can. They urgently appealed for international support.
They didn't send anything. They didn't respond. They let the people here down, and now the people here in Syria really know that now they are forgotten.
Jamala Karache, CNN, Idlib, Syria.
It's a common complaint nurses have expressed across the country. They say they are overworked because of staff shortages at hospitals. The Minnesota Nurses Association is trying to change that. Representatives from the group joined state legislators Monday to introduce a bill to address the crisis of understaffing, retention, and care at state hospitals.
I see a world where every nurse in Minnesota has the ability to advocate for their patients at the table with their employer.
Nurses are saying there aren't enough of us to do our jobs and do them well. And we want to solve that problem, and we want to create the conditions so that the nurses who are experienced choose to stay.
Last year, a strike by 15,000 nurses in Minnesota was averted when more than a dozen hospitals in the Twin Cities and Twin Ports area worked out a new contract agreement. That agreement included an 18% pay hike over 3 years for nurses in Twin Cities area and a 17% pay bump in the Twin Ports region. He loves you if you still love him. That's right, Barney is coming back. Mattel announced it is launching a new Barney TV show this time. The purple dinosaur will be animated. It sounds like they are betting on a hit. There will be merchandising to go along with the new show, including toys, clothes, and books. Production of the original Barney show stopped in 2010 after 28 years on the air. If you grew up with that version of Barney and still have retro love for it, there will be old school Barney toys and swag. Mattel is likely counting on some of that after the company gained the interest of adults when it brought back Masters of the Universe and Monster High. A mysterious ghost yacht gets buried at sea, and an owl takes over a college library. Coming up in today's Take a Look at This.
A mysterious yacht that sat abandoned for decades at a Maryland marina has been reborn through a watery burial as part of the state's artificial reef program. Locals say the 53-foot vessel, dubbed the Ghost Yacht, sat empty and unused at the Cedar Point Marina for as long as they could remember, a relic of a long-since passed owner that eventually belonged to the marina itself. The vessel's unique floating concrete structure is what inspired officials to finally put it to rest in Chesapeake Bay as part of the state's 21 artificial reefs, helping to expand habitats for aquatic life and create attractions for recreational divers. After years of neglect, this vintage vessel will now go down in history as a functional and beneficial sunken treasure. While that went down, something was up in a Georgia college library, and that something was a stubborn owl. Wait, who? Exactly. Students at Agnes Scott College say they were studying quietly when this barred owl suddenly flew out of the fireplace and up to the rafters where it's stayed ever since. At first, students had fun with it, even naming the library lurking bird Edgar Allan Poe, but once the bird started making its mark, it went from a real hoot to a real nuisance, one that days later school officials and falconers still can't seem to get rid of. Finally, watch a collection of cuddly critters run wild to celebrate National Golden Retriever Day in, where else? Golden, Colorado. The annual Goldens in Golden event is a sight to behold, big and bold and furry and gold, just like the popular pooch that bears its name. For Take a Look at This, I'm Jeremy Roth.
That's it for today's news. For Fisher's News Brief, I'm Adelisa Badzik.